there and welcome back to the Worship Podcast. I can't believe it's worship. I'm Lester Sim.
And I'm Lester Ong.
And once again, this is the Worship Podcast for amateurs by amateurs. In our previous episodes, we have been talking about the Tabernacle. In our latest one yet, we talked about the overall structure and the positioning of Israel around the Tabernacle. We talked about this idea of rest and God's presence being intertwined. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to literally take a walk into the Tabernacle. And actually, we're going to take a singular step in and talk about what we see. We're going to talk about the very first article. So it's the first part of our tour, our audio tour. If you're listening to this, we are bringing you on an audio tour through the first bit of the outer court. And so as we step in, good sir, what do we see? What's the first thing that we see?
The first article there is the brazen altar, the brass altar.
All right. Brazen, so it's brass, it's clarify this for us, because altar is, I guess in our society, that might be a little non-religious, right? Altar is not a word that we use very often. If you talk about an altar, like say, for example, in a Singaporean context where you have all these Asian religions, like we know what altars are.
Yes.
But maybe for some listeners out there who kind of go, well, this is Christianese. What is an altar?
Well, an altar is a place of sacrifice where you kill things and burn them up. In your Singapore context, I don't think you kill things and burn them up, but you put chickens and fruit and stuff on the altar.
Yeah. You put some food there as offerings.
Yes.
To deities. Yeah. Those are Asian religions.
Yeah.
Here's some Asian religions.
So in this context that we're talking about is a place where the animal sacrifice is made and then burnt up.
Right. So can you give us an idea of like how messy this would be?
Oh, I've never really killed an animal of any size. Although the other day we went fishing.
Oh, yes, you did. But you didn't do the killing, so.
No, but it was pretty gross because the fish was that big. It was a 70-something centimeter.
77 centimeter.
Salmon.
Yeah, not caught by me, not by Lester, but by good old Pastor Dave.
Yes.
And
so he had for one thing, when it came out of the water, it was wriggling and sort of flailing about and had to be sort of held down. And then later on, Dave had to gut it and all that sort of stuff, which all of it was just pretty gross.
Yeah. It is gross. Well, I've actually seen animals getting slaughtered.
Really?
Yeah, I know it's a weird one. And yes, Lester has never heard this before, but going through the military, we had to watch animals get slaughtered because that was part of our survival training. So it's almost like if you come across a chicken, what's the best way to kill it just so you can eat it, right? If you come across like a quail, how do you kill it? If you come across a goat, how do you kill it? And it's not a pleasant sight. It's messy. You really have to exert force. There are ways to do it, and yikes! A lot of bleating.
Yes.
Bleeding and bleating. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's noisy as well. So yikes. Yeah.
The fish went noisy though.
Yeah. Just flop, 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 flop. Yes. So yeah, it can be messy. And plus, whenever we talk about a sacrifice on the altar, we're not just talking about one, right? It could be, you know how you have the different types of sins and you bring in different types of sacrifices, right? And you could have like a particular sin which requires quite a few animals. And so you can imagine it's not just you kill one animal, it's, we're done. But you've got depending on how sinful you are, you might have quite a lot of animals to kill, and so it's a messy place.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe what I might do is I'll just quickly read out the passage from where we get this description of the altar of burnt offering, or the brazen altar.
Yeah.
And then we can sort of dig into it a bit more.
Sure.
So the description is in Exodus chapter 27, and here are my weak eyes going to squint a bit. So in chapter 27, verse 1, it says, "Build an altar of acacia wood 3 cubits high. It is to be square, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. Make a horn on each of the 4 corners, so that the horns and the altar are one piece, and overlay the altar with bronze." The horns, by the way, are how you tie down the animal. So you need something pointy, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Make all of the utensils of bronze, its pots to remove the ashes, and the shovels, sprinkling bowls, meat forks, and fire pans. This is a good old barbecue. And then make a grating for it, a bronze network, and make a bronze ring at each of the 4 corners of the network. Put it under the ledge of the altar so that it is halfway up the altar. Make poles of acacia wood for the altar and overlay them with bronze. The poles are to be inserted into the ring so they will be on 2 sides of the altar when it is carried, and make the altar hollow out of boards. It is to be made just as you were shown on the mountain. So that's the description. So it's a square thing, a bit high, with pointy corners.
Yeah.
The rings are quite immaterial, I think, because the rings are more for carrying it.
Yep.
Because there's a protocol where the Levites had to obviously move everything when God moved, and so
how do you carry it? Yeah.
Correct. Everything had to be on poles.
Yep. As you're reading that, I'm like, wow, that's literally a blueprint that is written out, and I'm just thinking, why couldn't they just draw it? Like,
I don't know.
Yeah, right. Like, if you could write, surely you could draw. Yeah. It's
yes.
Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure people trying to mimic this would be like, why couldn't you just like draw it out? But anyways.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. But by the way, one thing that I think is interesting, just tying back to your concept of sacrifice.
Yeah.
It is the first thing, right? That you have to get through to enter into the tabernacle. So It's the first thing as you enter the tabernacle, I should say. And here's the interesting thing for me: the word sacrifice or offering in Hebrew is korban, Corban.
Okay.
And that word actually means to draw near.
So sacrifice means draw near.
And I find that really interesting. And don't forget that in the biblical overview, we began talking about after Eden, one of the earlier expressions of worship was altar building.
Yep.
And presumably sacrifice as the means by which mankind would draw near to God.
Yep.
And here you've got this picture of the tabernacle instituted protocol of worship, which begins, if you want to draw near, you got to bring the sacrifice.
I do have a thought here because part of the reason why we're digging into this, as per what I said, I think in the previous episode, is because God here is the architect. Right, he's giving out all these things, and so we're studying these things with the intent of hopefully trying to understand who God is. What are some things that are upon His heart? Because ultimately, we want to enter into His presence, into a place of rest. Right. Someone who is not a Christian, or you could be a Christian as well. You could look here, and you could go, "Well, this is a bloodthirsty God." Why is the first thing a sacrifice, and it's a bloody sacrifice, right? Let's not water it down. It's a messy sacrifice where blood has to be spilled. It's not like you just like cut a slit on its artery and then like sew it back up just so it can continue on living, but you gotta kill it. So I know there's some people who say, oh, how can you believe in a God that's bloodthirsty? And I do think that we have to kind of talk about this, since we are talking about an altar here, and sacrifice, therefore, is an implication here, right? What's going on here? What's the bigger picture? How can we understand this the best way?
Gee, you're asking me that.
Yes, there is no one else in this room.
Man, it's just really exposing us as real amateurs here. But I guess one thought about sacrifice is that it's an externalization of an inward attitude, right? Where we have to kill something. And I suppose what God really wants to really be who God is in our lives, it requires him to, as John would say, it requires him to increase and for us to decrease.
Yeah.
Not that God can ever increase anymore, but from our perspective, he must increase.
Yeah.
And from our perspective, we must decrease.
Yeah.
Sacrifice tells us that you've got to bring something costly. It's got to hurt a bit so that you need to decrease.
Yeah. So why then not like, I'm gonna bring my gold, like I'm gonna take like my most prized possession. Why does it have to be blood?
Okay.
Okay.
You tell me.
Let me help you.
I have an idea.
I have an idea. All right. Yeah. So, all right, here we go. Let me try to put together my thoughts. Well, this whole idea of firstly walking into the tabernacle is that you have the intent of wanting to step into God's presence, right? And I think, and we know this as Christians, the one thing that stands as a barrier between God and people, if you want to step in, that barrier is sin.
Yeah. And
what we do know is somewhere, let me know if you know the quote or the reference. The wages of sin is death.
Yes, Romans 3:23.
Genius. So, therefore,
and I'm not even a maths teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what we have here is, all right, we got sin that's a hindrance, and it's almost like when we first come to the altar, it's God saying we have to deal with this first. This is your own, in my mind, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. This is your only hindrance. Your sin, because we have a holy God that needs our sin to be dealt with, unless he comes on his terms, right? Like how we talked about how he encountered Jacob and whatnot, touched him and whatnot. Jacob didn't die. So, in order to deal with your sin, how do you deal with it? Death, right? Wages of sin is death, and of course, I think. To me, there are two things that could happen. You could say, all right, I want to enter into God's presence. Well, the way to deal with it is to die. So I could kill myself, right? Kind of thing, right? Where you kill the sinner. But then it stops there because you cannot then enter in. So there has to be like, it's
a
almost,
proxy.
Yeah, proxy or foreshadowing of something that is to come in. And Hebrews does talk about it after, where the blood of these sacrifices cannot appease God. And it's almost like a proxy that is a foreshadowing of ultimately, you as a sinner, you are deserving of death. And so death means blood is spilled, not just spilled, but death happens. So death happens on the altar. And so when I think of someone saying, how can you believe in a bloodthirsty God? My reasoning will be because I believe in the severity of sin. That the severity of sin necessitates that there must be death.
Yes.
So that's how serious it is.
Mm.
So it's not that he is bloodthirsty, but it's the seriousness of that sin.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so even, say for example, in the Garden of Eden, right, where you had the first instance of sin in Genesis 3, how they royally messed up after 3 chapters. And so what we do see is that they try to cover themselves up with fig leaves, but God comes and provides them with animal skin. Where does it come from? A dead animal. Presumably an animal that had to be sacrificed.
Yes.
Same concept here where sin results in death. Yeah. And so I think this picture here is, you want to come into God's presence, deal with the only thing that's stopping you, and that's your sin. And therefore, how do you deal with it? Death has to happen. Yeah.
And I suppose 2 big words came to mind when you were saying that. So I'm thinking the purpose of the sacrifice, the slaughter. One is propitiation, so the satisfaction of the price, the wages of sin, right?
Okay.
And then the other word is the substitution.
Yep.
So instead of me dying, this animal dies in my place.
Correct.
And that is the means by which we then
can enter in,
deal with God's holiness, so that we can approach a holy God and draw near.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in fact, I don't know if it's too early now to foreshadow Jesus, but the altar is made of 2 things, right? In this passage, you've got acacia wood, which actually forms its structure, and acacia wood is symbolic because it's a sort of wood that doesn't decay very easily. So it's a picture of incorruptibility. And then you've got bronze, which in biblical symbolism is always to do with judgment. So you've got this, maybe it could be said this is a picture of Jesus, incorruptible man, overlaid with bronze, taking on judgment. And so it happens here at the very first thing as we approach, is that we have to come through Christ, who took on our judgment for us.
I think the only reason why I might say that that's really plausible and we're not reading too much into things is because ultimately, like what we said, the blueprint came from God himself. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's embedded like all these like Easter eggs in there. And it's a timeless thing that for us now looking back, oh wow, like everything just points to Christ.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I guess what we're talking about that. So for us then, if we talked about how we are the tabernacles now and where we want to enter in, this means that almost in some sense, the very first thing that we have to bear in mind or to be mindful of, and I don't mean mindful in a new age way, but like in a literal, like let's be mindful of the sacrifice of Christ.
Yeah.
Because we have to deal with our sin, right? But we look upon the altar and the sacrifice has been made. The price has been paid. We have been substituted.
Yeah.
It's not a small thing. It's a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
But through that, we can deal with God's holiness and we can enter in.
Yep.
So you cannot skirt around the work of the cross. The work of the cross is the very first thing you come through.
Yes.
Yep.
And that is the case for our Christian life. It's completely devoid of any meaning or substance without coming through the cross.
Yeah. And it's not even something that you just see and go, yeah. But you have to acknowledge that sacrifice was for you. Right? Because you could just walk by and go, well, here's that sacrifice. But you have to acknowledge that was for my sin. And then it's almost like all right, you go on ahead.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah. Um, while we're on this, a verse to back this up from Hebrews 7:27. Here we go. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins, then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. So, Hebrews here doesn't spare the language of Jesus being a sacrifice. And so I think it's not a stretch to say that this brazen altar is closely linked with what Jesus did on the cross.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so. When you're reading 7, I actually preferred chapter 10.
Go for it, sir.
Okay, small text again, but it's quite... And the author of Hebrews actually does a bit of biblical exposition, which I think is really interesting. So he quotes an Old Testament passage and then he reinterprets it. So it starts with, the law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, and not the realities themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifices repeated endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. So, that idea of drawing near is there as well. If it could, would they not have stopped being offered? For the worshippers would have been cleansed once for all, and would no longer have felt guilty for their sins. So that's the concept of sin. But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins. So I stopped there because, we talked about propitiation and substitution. But the author of Hebrews says, because of its imperfect nature, ironically, it didn't serve that completely. It actually is a reminder of how imperfect you are, because you had to do it over and over again.
Yes.
So I found that pretty cool that this author of Hebrews says that. And he says the reason for that is because it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, and now this is the cross-reference to Psalm 40, I think.
Yep.
Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. With burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased. Then I said, here I am. It is written about me in the scroll. I've come to do your will, O God. So taking this little chunk of a psalm, which is prefiguring Christ.
Yep.
The author says, first, he said, sacrifices and offerings, burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not desire, nor were you pleased with them, although the law required them to be made, in parentheses, which I think is really funny. Then he said, here I am, I've come to do your will. He sets aside the first to establish the second. So when he says, here I am to do your will, essentially is like Jesus is saying, my body, my whole being is the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right. And goes, and by that will, offering himself, we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all.
Yep.
What an amazing picture and an explanation from the author of Hebrews.
Yeah, very logical person.
Yeah.
Definitely not John.
And that's how you exposit the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, actually, there's something that I chanced on. I wasn't thinking of talking about this when we first read this before the recording. But yeah, when you look at verse 4 where it says, it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. So, what then happened in the Old Testament?
It's just it's a temporary fix.
Yeah. It is a temporal fix.
Yeah. Which is what he's saying. You just got to keep doing it year after year after year.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
And because of the repetitiveness of it,
it reminds you.
Yeah, it actually has the opposite effect. It constantly tells you, because you're so stuffed and because you're so dumb and immoral, you've just got to keep doing this.
Yeah. Yep.
So it could never, in that sense, cleanse the conscience, which I think, the laver we'll talk about next week or the next episode.
Yep.
Deals with the cleansing of the conscience.
Yep.
But here, the sacrifice propitiates momentarily. The sacrifice substitutes temporarily.
Yeah.
And Hebrews says we needed something better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and this is why I think it's just an amazing thing when we talk about the tabernacle. This is the gospel right there, just at the right through the front door of it.
Yep.
Come through Jesus, the sacrifice once and for all that wipes away all your sins.
Yeah. Oh man, but it's amazing, but also a sad thing that these people who had to go through the system, that they would never get to see, or not like us, where we know that there is an ultimate sacrifice for us once for all, but they had to keep going through it over and over again.
Yeah.
But here is God playing the long game, and like it's a beautiful tapestry, right, of just everything, just like it's slowly playing out, but all these things are interwoven to each other.
Yeah.
Wow, it is beautiful.
Yep.
Yes. It seems like, oh well, we actually did spend quite a bit of time talking about the sacrifice aspect. Is there anything else that we could tie into this, or anything else that comes to mind for you?
Well, the only other thing that comes to mind, but I think, I feel like you sort of hit a zenith with this. But, the idea of tying down the sacrifice also, for me, speaks of submission. The idea that the sacrifice is constantly trying to get off the altar.
Yeah.
And we talked about the horns being how you tie down the sacrifice. But yeah, whoa. I don't think any sacrifice willingly wants to be there.
Whoa. So hold on. Is this then possibly also pointing to the cross, because Jesus was nailed down? There are so many other ways to die, right? But not every way is one that involves some form of pinning down or tying down. Oh.
Yeah, and in fact, you could say that submission, that pinning down, happened the night before at Gethsemane, when Jesus says, "Not my will, but yours be done."
Yeah.
Or as the author of the Hebrews says, "I said, here I am. It is written about me, I've come to do your will, O God."
Yeah. Wow, it's beautiful but dark at the same time. Yeah. It's almost like, here's a method through which this ultimate sacrifice will be made for you.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Dang.
Oh, yikes, man.
Yeah, and I think it's a type of Christ. It's a foreshadowing of Christ, but it's also a typification of what our Christian walk should be like.
Yeah.
A life of offering ourselves as living sacrifices. Romans 12:1 says that.
Yep.
And then also submitting ourselves to God.
Yep.
So saying, "It's not my will, but your will be done." And I think as we began, that God would be increased and we would be decreased.
Yep. So this sacrifice is not one that produces a response where we go, yeah, we're free to do whatever we want, but like what you said, like when we fully understand the gravity of this sacrifice, our response should naturally be then one of submission, to also say, here I am as a living sacrifice for your will to be done in and through my life.
Yes.
Because I have that ultimate freedom in Christ. I have eternal life in Christ. He sacrificed his life for me. And so my life is now for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think ironically, and I think Tim Keller talks about this, and I've got a few examples from him, but ironically, this sort of sacrifice and submission is actually what gives us the widest of freedoms.
Yeah.
Because, the Christian life must also be characterized by freedom, but it's not a freedom to do
whatever
anything you
want.
like. Yeah.
Yep.
But nonetheless, it's the freest you'll ever be.
Yep.
Tim Keller's example is, a fish that's, we're using that fish analogy again.
Here we go. The salmon's back.
Yeah, the salmon. Yeah, the salmon in the ocean is the freest of creatures.
Yep.
Once it's on the beach, like if the salmon said, I want to be even more free, I'm going to go and sit by the beach.
Flop, flop, flop.
Exactly. So outside of the bounds of what is intended for the salmon, it will actually suffocate and die. But if it was doing what it was designed to do, and in the broad open space of the ocean that, let's say the Lord had intended for the salmon is incredibly free. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're saying that our water is being in submission to the Lord. And in and through that water, we find our ultimate freedom.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so it sounds grisly. It sounds like quite a negative thing.
Yeah.
But the path of the cross is actually a path of great liberation for the Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. And this also debunks that myth that there is true ultimate freedom where you can do whatever you want. That is a myth, because that's something that we, especially in our current day and age, I don't think we used to talk about it many, many decades ago, but now is this idea of like, well, we should be free to do anything we want, but that is a myth. You're ultimately always a slave to something.
Yeah. I think so.
Very nice, sir.
And brings me back to last episode. We talked about Matthew 11:28 again.
Come unto me.
Yep, come unto me, all who are weary laden, and I will give you rest, because my yoke is easy
and my burden is light.
And so those two words are antithetical. They're oxymoronic. To have an easy yoke and a light burden.
Yes.
It's like no one goes, I'm so burdened today.
But it's easy.
Yeah. Oh, man, that was a great yoke. But Jesus is what a clever wordplay here, right?
Yeah.
He's saying it looks like a burden. It looks like a restriction. It looks like a yoke. You're stuck to me. But hey, it's the best place you could ever be.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah. Amazing. And all that from a little piece of square structure.
Wow. A lot of things that we talked about that didn't come to mind before this, but I'm always thankful that we do these kind of in-depth studies, because it's not something that I would personally go, hey, you know what, I want to study more about this. So to have a mate like you kind of going like, all right, let's walk through this together. I'm edified, because as we do this together, a lot of things just come to the fore, and I benefit personally. I'm not sure about you.
No, I've been moved several times, as you've heard.
Yeah, and so yeah, I'm thankful for this journey that we're on, and hopefully some of you are on this journey with us. With that, we have come to the end of today's episode. We hope you have enjoyed tuning in with us. So this is just the episode on the brazen altar. And in our next episode, we're going to move on to the next article, which is the
brazen laver.
The brazen laver. So we're gonna
bowl. The bronze bowl.
The bronze bowl. That's just more common language. Yeah. So we're gonna talk about that, and trust that. I trust that no matter what, like we're always gonna have great stuff that we can dig into, and so we hope that you're blessed by this. Once again, if there's anything that has spoken to you that you feel like it's blessed your heart, comment, let us know. We always appreciate it. But otherwise, we thank you for your time, and we will see you on the next one.
Bye for now.
Goodbye.